Elon Musk discovers waiter who is a retired NASA engineer and does the unthinkable in his life. Prepare yourselves for a twist that defies conventional expectations. This is no ordinary evening, and our protagonist is no ordinary waiter. Stay with us until the end to witness the astonishing turn that will shake up everything you thought possible. Marcus Hayes was never the type of man to draw attention to himself. At first glance, one might see a somewhat reserved server carrying trays of piping hot meals across the bustling floor of an upscale Los Angeles restaurant. His friendly smile and courteous demeanor made him a favorite among regulars, but few would suspect the incredible intellect and grand ambitions he kept quietly locked away. Under those neatly pressed sleeves, hidden from curious onlookers, lay the remnants of a life once filled with rocket schematics, prototype modules, and hush-hush missions designed to reach farther than any human had ventured before. Although he'd been a NASA engineer long ago, Marcus chose to slip beneath society's radar after a personal tragedy forced him to step away from the exhilarating path of space exploration. The clinking silverware, the low hum of conversation, and the swirl of perfume mingling with the scent of roasted garlic became his new regular. There was a strange comfort in routine. Every evening he'd meticulously polish glassware, memorize the specials, and politely greet anyone who crossed his station. In these moments, he sometimes felt like he was living a life of borrowed anonymity, removed from the frantic pace of rocket launches and the feverish energy of scientific breakthroughs. Yet beneath his practiced composure, Marcus harbored a quietly building unease. Each passing day reminded him of the lost opportunity to push human frontiers into new territory. His heart clenched when he watched news segments about space station experiments or the occasional shuttle launch. His mind was flooded with memories of fast-paced lab discussions, sleepless nights solving critical equations, and the triumphant roar accompanying a successful liftoff. He was proud of his contributions. He had helped design key components for landing modules used in deep space probes, but life had a way of carving paths no one could anticipate. He told no one of his past, fearing that if he revealed himself, old scars would resurface, and he would be confronted by dreams he'd deliberately set aside. Late at night, after closing time, he'd find himself gazing up at the stars, recalling how he once felt a deep connection to them. The stars twinkled back at him like old friends, reminding him of unfinished business. Whenever that familiar longing stirred, he tried to quell it by focusing on his current reality. Rent was due, the restaurant needed his diligence, and he preferred not to let regrets cast a shadow over his daily life. And so, day after day, year after year, Marcus's life in that restaurant continued in steady cycles. He poured wine, recommended entrees, and charmed patrons with his warmth. In truth, he was not miserable, but he was far from fulfilled. However, as fate often conspires to surprise us at the most unexpected junctures, a single night and a single customer would soon tear the veil of his hidden identity and set him on a collision course with everything he thought he had left behind. If only he'd known that an unannounced, somewhat reclusive billionaire was about to stride through the restaurant doors, demanding more than just dinner. The stage was set for an encounter that would rattle Marcus's carefully guarded secrets and beckon him, once again, toward the heavens he had so reluctantly abandoned. The restaurant glowed under the evening's soft lights as patrons filed in, some eagerly awaiting special occasions, others simply passing the time. Marcus carried a tray laden with desserts when he noticed a man seated at the corner table, flanked by an air of mild celebrity. Subtle whispers fluttered among the waitstaff, prompting him to look again. It was Elon Musk, an entrepreneur whose name echoed across the globe for his boundary-pushing forays into space technology, electric vehicles, and futuristic tunnels. A few of Marcus's co-workers tried to nudge each other forward, hoping someone else would wait on this high-profile guest. They were uncertain how to handle a tech billionaire, worried about making a faux pas. Marcus felt a slight quiver in his stomach. However, without missing a beat, he stepped toward the table, determined to treat this visitor like any other patron, polite, composed, and prepared for any special request. He introduced himself with the gentle smile he gave everyone, pen and pad ready to jot down Elon's order. Elon studied Marcus for a moment, then asked for a glass of water, his voice calm but carrying a palpable intensity. Marcus nodded, making a mental note, then returned with a crystal goblet moments later. As he poured, Elon asked in a neutral tone, "Do you enjoy working here?" It was a curious question that carried more weight than casual restaurant banter typically did. Startled, Marcus answered truthfully, explaining that he found the job steady and appreciated interacting with new people. Something in Elon's gaze sharpened. The moment was small yet electric, like a fuse had been lit. Marcus had no idea that thoughts were already stirring behind Elon's friendly inquiry. A single spark of recognition would soon emerge, fueled by the subtle but unmistakable hints of Marcus's more profound intellect, culminating in an opportunity neither man could anticipate. Sometimes, the quietest conversations are the ones with the loudest consequences. Marcus had left the NASA facility abruptly 5 years prior, driven by a painful blend of circumstance and family tragedy. His late wife, Felicia, had been battling a degenerative illness that required round-the-clock care. At first, Marcus tried to balance the high-stakes demands of being an aerospace engineer with the emotional and physical toll of caregiving. For a while, he had managed, thanks to supportive colleagues and telecommuting arrangements. But as Felicia's condition worsened, the nights became longer and more helpless, the mornings more fraught with worry. One evening, realizing he could no longer uphold the rigorous demands of his role at NASA while tending to her, he submitted his resignation. Shortly after, Felicia's health declined rapidly. Marcus watched the love of his life slip away in a small, sterile hospital room, each beep of medical equipment echoing like a reminder of time running out. When she passed, a part of him went with her. Their shared dreams of building a future that involved exploring outer space and nurturing a loving family on Earth crumbled instantly. Unable to face the colleagues who remembered him as the brilliant mind behind pivotal modules and crucial calculations, he chose a quieter life away from rocket towers and aerospace labs. Stunned by grief and searching for grounding, Marcus found work in a restaurant. It was meant to be temporary, to occupy his hands and keep him from spiraling. The daily routine and the steady paycheck allowed him a semblance of peace, or at least a place to hide from his old ambitions. He moved to a smaller apartment, donated most of his NASA souvenirs, and when asked about his past, spoke only of general hobbies and a vague mention of technical work. Yet, as the years passed, the longing to return to the research he once found exhilarating never fully dimmed. He missed the hush of the lab at night, the buzzing excitement of launching a successful test, and the camaraderie of working alongside talented scientists who thrived on the impossible. He'd dream of rocket engines roaring to life, jolt awake in the small hours, and remind himself that he'd made his choice. Even so, the emptiness gnawed at him, reminding him of his lost potential and his promises to Felicia, who always believed in him more than he believed in himself. That was why, on the night Elon Musk walked into the restaurant, the stakes were higher than they might have seemed. To any other waiter, it would have been simply another celebrity to serve. But for Marcus, it felt as if a door had creaked open, allowing slivers of light to illuminate the dark corridor he had been walking alone for so long. He had never considered re-entering the high-octane world of aerospace and technology, but the mere sight of Elon conjured up memories of designs, equations, and star-filled possibilities. This unlikely meeting could spark a new trajectory for his life, and the excitement was tempered by a profound terror of letting himself hope again. As the restaurant's evening rush simmered down, Elon Musk beckoned Marcus closer with a relaxed gesture. Elon's eyes had an undeniable curiosity, a spark that suggested he sensed something more beneath the surface. Their conversation began innocently enough. Elon praised Marcus's attentive service, remarking how thoroughly he answered every question about the menu. Then, with an almost casual air, he shifted the topic to technology. "Have you always worked in hospitality?" he asked. Marcus forced a polite smile, carefully choosing a reply that glossed over his past. Yet Elon pressed on, inquiring about any prior engineering experience or background in problem-solving. It was uncanny, like Elon had caught a faint whiff of something extraordinary and couldn't let it go. Marcus's heart pounded in his chest. With a reluctant sigh, he revealed that he'd once been involved in aerospace work, though he didn't elaborate. Elon leaned forward, an amused yet intrigued expression on his face. "Which company?" he asked, not unkindly. Marcus exhaled, gaze lowering to the polished wood floor. NASA, he admitted softly, offering no further details. At the mention of that revered name, Elon's eyes lit up, brimming with questions. Marcus watched the excitement swell, a swirl of feelings roiling inside him. Pride, fear, nostalgia, and an undeniable gravitational pull back into a world he had tried to leave behind. That night, after the final patrons paid their checks, Elon requested a private conversation. Standing by a quiet corner near the bar, the tech mogul spoke passionately about his plans for new satellite-based innovations, advanced rocket designs, and the challenges of sustaining life on Mars. He confessed his constant need for bright minds, visionaries, and those who truly understood how to solve problems from the inside out. Marcus listened, half entranced, half hesitant. The last thing he wanted was to stir up heartbreak by stepping back into that intense realm. Yet he couldn't deny the undeniable spark flickering inside him. Elon asked if Marcus would consider consulting for a short period, no strings attached. They could brainstorm about rocket engine modifications, heat shield designs, or the use of certain alloys in future craft. Immediately, Marcus's mind raced through old equations and problem sets, remembering the triumphs and failures that had once shaped his identity. After spending years hiding as a waiter, it seemed surreal to get such an offer. In truth, it felt too good, almost like a dream that would vanish at dawn. But Elon wasn't just offering a job, he was extending a bridge back to a path Marcus had once cherished. And though fear rooted Marcus's feet to the floor, he saw a potential route to fulfill promises he'd made to himself, perhaps to honor Felicia's unwavering belief in him. So, with a shaky breath, he nodded, telling Elon he would think it over. Elon gave him a business card, a reassuring nod, and one last piercing look before leaving the restaurant. That was how a single dinner sparked a grand new proposal for Marcus. Just like that, the life he'd managed to lock away threatened to burst open again, leaving him with a monumental choice. He could decline, remain in the subdued comfort of his nightly routines, or accept and risk heartbreak once more, albeit with the chance to redeem his dormant brilliance. Torn by conflicting desires, he tucked Elon's card into his pocket, unsure if he was ready to leap, yet equally unwilling to let the opportunity vanish forever. Marcus hovered in the doorway of a sleek industrial building on Los Angeles's outskirts. Its exterior was unremarkable, but inside, it teemed with cutting-edge research, advanced 3D printers, and engineers hunched over complex prototypes. Clutching Elon's business card in one hand, Marcus took a hesitant step forward, half expecting a security guard to insist he had the wrong place. Instead, he was greeted by an assistant who recognized his name immediately and ushered him into a hallway lined with photographs of rocket launches and futuristic concept designs. Every cell in Marcus's body buzzed with apprehension. The last time he'd walked into a space-focused facility, he was still wearing a NASA badge around his neck, a younger man convinced he could change the trajectory of humankind. Now, after so many silent years, he felt like an outsider. Yet the environment was eerily familiar, the hum of high-voltage equipment, the faint smell of synthetic lubricants in the air, and the hushed conversations punctuated by the occasional burst of excitement or frustration. As he moved along, he was introduced to a small cluster of engineers specializing in rocket propulsion and materials science. Their gazes flickered with curiosity at the newcomer whom Elon had personally invited. Marcus felt a rush of warmth as he recognized the universal language of engineering, the coffee-stained spreadsheets on desks, the half-eaten sandwiches left abandoned during moments of inspiration, and the scribbles of half-formed formulas on white boards. Though he tried to keep a calm facade, every new face and every snippet of data swirling around him reminded him that this was the realm where he truly belonged. Elon appeared suddenly from behind a glass-paneled conference room, greeting Marcus with a nod. In a matter-of-fact tone, he explained that he wanted Marcus to observe and perhaps weigh in on a few of the challenges they faced. One involved optimizing fuel mixtures to reduce weight while maintaining thrust capacity. Another concerned structural integrity at extreme temperatures. Marcus stood quietly, absorbing the details, his analytical mind awakening from a long slumber. Gradually, he spoke up, first in timid, measured suggestions, then with growing confidence, as if a dam had broken and a torrent of stored knowledge was finally unleashed. The engineers around him listened intently. Some looked surprised to learn that the mild-mannered man in plain clothes was once key to designing modules now traveling through space. Marcus answered each question. Marcus responded to each question they asked with a precision that only comes from intimate, hands-on experience. Doubts that had plagued him for years began to dissolve, replaced by a rising sense of belonging. Hours slipped by unnoticed. By the time Marcus left the building, he had scribbled half a notebook's worth of ideas and potential solutions. Ever the visionary, Elon handed Marcus a preliminary contract, urging him to consider a more permanent position. Marcus felt a thrill beyond simple ambition, a poignant mixture of excitement, responsibility, and the faint shimmer of something he dared to call hope. As he drove back toward his cramped apartment, his thoughts spun. He pictured Felicia's comforting smile, conjuring her encouragement in his mind. Stepping into this new world wasn't just about chasing progress or reviving an old career. It was about honoring her memory and finally walking forward, free from the shackles of his grief. With each mile passed, he grew more convinced that he was on the cusp of a journey that could redefine his life, perhaps in ways he could never have predicted. Before we continue, I want to pause the story briefly. I dream of reaching 500 subscribers, and I'd love your support. If you've been enjoying this adventure, please click that subscribe button. Leave a comment saying yes if it's to your liking or 1 if not. Your feedback will help me grow and improve. Thank you for being here. Now, let's dive back into the story. Back at the restaurant, tensions ran high. Marcus had cut back on his shifts to meet with Elon and his team, which drew the ire of his manager. The once steady job, which had provided him a discreet refuge, suddenly became a battleground where scheduling conflicts and missed shifts threatened his livelihood. Colleagues whispered rumors that he was chasing some pie-in-the-sky fantasy, and more than one server muttered that Marcus was abandoning them during the busiest nights. The strain at work was compounded by mounting bills at home. Although Marcus had received a partial stipend for his consulting time at Elon's facility, it wasn't enough to cover all his expenses. Uncertain about whether to fully commit to Elon's project, he tried to keep a foothold in both worlds, but the balancing act grew increasingly unsustainable. His manager threatened to cut his hours further if he couldn't remain consistent, and Marcus feared losing the steady paycheck altogether. Night after night, he'd lie awake, wrestling with the gnawing thought that he might be on the verge of repeating past mistakes, making a leap of faith only to crash into devastating consequences. On top of these practical troubles, old emotional wounds began to resurface. Each time Marcus immersed himself in calculations and rocket schematics, he'd be reminded of Felicia. Sometimes, he felt her absence like a physical ache, threatening to unravel him at the most inconvenient moments. He'd be halfway through an exciting demonstration of a propulsion model, then catch sight of her photograph in his apartment, her gentle smile encouraging him yet triggering a wave of sorrow. He questioned whether moving forward with the project was honoring her memory or risking heartbreak again if things went wrong. Then Elon delivered another piece of news. The project's timetable had been accelerated. Government approvals, private funding, and competitive pressures meant they needed results sooner rather than later. That placed even more responsibility on Marcus's shoulders. Every slight miscalculation could cost millions of dollars or derail months of progress. Marcus felt the weight pressing down on him, especially when he saw how Elon's team looked to him for insight. Their confidence gave him courage, yet it also amplified his fear. Was he ready to stand at the forefront of aerospace innovation again, given how abruptly he'd abandoned that life? In these swirling anxieties, Marcus found himself torn by conflicting loyalties. The quiet monotony of restaurant work felt suffocating, but it was also familiar and safe. The laboratory was electrifying yet fraught with obligations and the risk of emotional implosion. As the days passed, the mounting pressure at his day job, the intensifying demands at Elon's facility, and the upwelling of personal grief forced Marcus to question which path led to healing, and whether he could handle the heartbreak if the gamble turned sour. He clung to a thin thread of resolve for now, determined not to let regret shape his life any longer. Amid the turbulence, the next major step was assembling a specialized group of experts to work closely with Marcus on the subsequent development phase. Elon's company was vast, with employees spanning many disciplines, from physicists to software coders, materials researchers, and test pilots. However, Elon wanted a smaller, more agile unit for this project, capable of pivoting quickly and pushing boundaries without cumbersome oversight. Marcus walked into a newly allocated workspace, a large hangar-like room filled with sturdy metal tables and lined with 3D printers humming softly. Under the fluorescent lights, he met the new arrivals. Dr. Irene Roberts was a no-nonsense structural engineer with a knack for designing lightweight fuselages. Her determination was on her sleeve, her eyes flashing with the confidence from countless problem-solving triumphs. Then there was Calvin Wu, a computational genius whose code had helped land rovers on distant planetary bodies. Rumor had it he slept only 4 hours a night and spent the rest of his time perfecting his algorithms. Sofia Martinez, a test pilot turned aerodynamic consultant, rounded out the team. She possessed first-hand experience in real-world flight conditions and could spot impractical design elements that purely theoretical minds might overlook. Though they came from diverse backgrounds, they shared a unique trait, the burning desire to break new ground in aerospace. And there was an immediate rapport with Marcus. Something in his aura, perhaps his modesty and proven expertise, endeared him to them. He found himself leading discussions, scribbling complicated formulas on whiteboards while the others chimed in with their insights. It was invigorating to bounce ideas off minds just as sharp as his, to watch designs evolve as a collective force refine them hour by hour. Despite the synergy, tensions occasionally flared. Dr. Roberts favored heavier but more robust materials, while Calvin argued for ultralight compositions that tested the boundaries of known stress tolerances. Sophia demanded that certain design elements incorporate backup safety systems, prompting lively debates. Marcus found himself in the eye of the storm, mediating these disagreements and synthesizing the best aspects of each viewpoint. Beneath the technical arguments, though, lay a mutual respect for one another's genius, ensuring that conflicts never truly boiled over. Gradually, their workspace transformed from a makeshift lab into a creative nexus, each table cluttered with half-built prototypes, tangled wires, and coffee cups. Together, they envisioned a rocket stage that could reach higher orbits more efficiently, using cutting-edge fuel formulations and composite materials. The early sketches and simulations were promising, kindling a collective excitement. Marcus felt his old passion rekindling with a vigor he hadn't experienced in years. Working late into the night alongside these skilled colleagues reminded him of better days at NASA, but this was different too. A chance to build something from scratch, unburdened by layers of bureaucracy. In this new environment, ideas could flow faster, constraints could be challenged, and every team member had an equal voice in shaping the future. If only life outside these walls could be so straightforward, Marcus thought, as he braced for the following challenges that would inevitably come their way. Success in aerospace often follows a road paved with frustrations, and the team's first significant setback arrived dramatically. One early morning, after months of design work and small-scale tests, they geared up for a critical bench test of a new rocket engine segment. Hopes were high. The test rig sat on a concrete platform several miles from populated areas, reflecting the inherent danger of working with volatile propellants. The air was tense with anticipation as the countdown began. Marcus and Dr. Roberts stood side by side, monitors glowing with real-time data. Calvin monitored the rocket's computational feedback while Sophia hovered behind protective glass, eager to note any potential aerodynamic quirks in the exhaust plume. A sharp roar filled the area when the test ignited, the ground trembling beneath their feet. For the first few seconds, it looked promising. The engine flared with a brilliant glare, sustaining thrust at levels they had painstakingly calculated. Marcus let out a breath he hadn't realized he was holding. Then, without warning, a violent shudder coursed through the structure. Sparks erupted from the nozzle, followed by a deafening crack that echoed across the test site. Alarms blared as the rocket engine sputtered and failed catastrophically. Flames spurted from the side, engulfing part of the test platform in thick black smoke. Engineers scrambled to engage emergency shutdown procedures, voices crackling through walkie-talkies. Marcus's heart pounded, dread churning in his stomach. It took an agonizing hour to ensure the site was safe. When the smoke finally cleared, the damage was worse than they feared. A critical portion of the rocket casing buckled under thermal stress, fracturing the composite material in multiple places. Remnants of the nozzle lay scattered, charred, and twisted like melted plastic. The team watched, stunned, as rescue personnel and fire suppression units rushed in. The emotional blow was immediate and profound. They had invested countless hours, pushing themselves to exhaustion for this test, only to see it go up in flames. Dr. Roberts felt personally responsible, tears threatening to surface as she stared at the fractured composite she had championed. Calvin was equally shaken, trying to trace the error in his code that might have missed a critical pressure spike. Sophia paced, furious at the possibility that they had overlooked standard safeguards. For Marcus, it felt like a brutal collision between his resurrected dreams and harsh reality. Questions swirled around him. Had he returned to this world only to fail? Could he bear another crushing loss? As debriefing meetings commenced, the team sought to pinpoint the flaw. They analyzed data logs, comparing them against theoretical models. Everyone braced themselves for potential backlash from Elon and the higher-ups, uncertain whether budgets would be slashed or entire lines of research abandoned. Marcus felt a tremor of guilt. He was brought on board as a secret weapon, a genius in stealth mode, and yet the outcome of their first major test was catastrophic. Yet, in this dark moment, true innovation's essence showed itself. The team, though shaken, refused to implode. They rallied, diving into problem-solving mode with a fervor born of desperation and stubborn hope. Each found a corner of the disaster to analyze, determined not to let the setback define them. Marcus, remembering NASA's many failures that preceded triumphant successes, told himself this was just one rung on the ladder. Even if it felt like the world had collapsed, he could almost sense Felicia's unwavering belief enveloping him, whispering that one failure did not spell the end of the dream. Despite the gloom over them, the team refused to stand idle. Days turned into nights as they dissected every piece of data from the failed test. They uncovered hidden stress points, identified a set of flawed assumptions in the computational models, and realized that certain materials, though theoretically promising, lacked the resilience needed under real-world conditions. Each revelation cut deep but paved the way for a more straightforward path forward. While morale wavered, Marcus found a renewed sense of determination. He threw himself into the research, poring over old NASA case studies documenting similar engine malfunctions. He stayed up, eyes burning, to rerun advanced simulations on new composite materials. Dr. Roberts teamed up with him, apologizing repeatedly for any oversight she might have made. Marcus assured her nobody was to blame. This was the nature of exploratory engineering, where breakthroughs were often born from the ashes of trial and error. Then came the day Calvin discovered a critical fix in the code that controlled fuel injection timing. Perhaps an overlooked variable had caused the flow to spike at the worst possible moment. Eager to test the correction, he approached the group, eyes alive with excitement. Sophia was quick to point out that hardware changes would also be necessary. The rocket's entire structural frame needed reinforcement at its stress-bearing joints. Dr. Roberts agreed, proposing a new layering technique to distribute heat more evenly, thereby reducing the risk of buckling. Marcus orchestrated these innovations into a cohesive plan, combining their contributions into a new engine design. He drafted an internal memo detailing the updated calculations and the recommended modifications. With trembling hands, he forwarded it to Elon and the upper management. Would they grant the additional budget and schedule time to retest? Or would the failings scare off the very people funding their efforts? The response arrived late that evening. Not only did the leadership approve the updated design, but Elon expressed unwavering support. He recognized the significance of the discovery and trusted the team's vision. Bolstered by this backing, Marcus and his colleagues experienced a surge of collective relief and excitement. The tension gripped them began to ease for the first time in weeks, replaced by a resolute camaraderie. With newfound hope, they worked around the clock to fabricate the improved engine segment. Technicians refined the composite layers, while Calvin tested his corrected code in simulated runs that mirrored extreme flight conditions. Each mini-success, a stable ignition in a controlled environment or a near-perfect stress reading in the lab, reignited their faith in the project. Yes, the memory of the catastrophic failure still loomed, but it also served as a potent reminder of how critical it was to iterate, refine, and never settle. Marcus stood one late night in the lab, gazing at the partially assembled rocket stage. He thought of Felicia, wishing she could see him like this, hands smudged with grease, mind alight with possibility, no longer shackled by sorrow or regret. Perhaps he was finally proving that stepping forward didn't mean erasing his past. Instead, it meant integrating it, using every success and every failure to fuel a future worth believing in. Just as the project regained momentum, life dealt Marcus another blow. One evening, as he flipped through his mail, he found a letter postmarked from a small hospice center. It was from an old family acquaintance informing him that his beloved uncle, one of the few relatives he had left, was losing a battle with cancer. The hospice suggested that Marcus visit soon if he wishes to say goodbye. The news blindsided him. His uncle had been a quiet supporter throughout his life, offering a listening ear when Felicia passed and a small loan when Marcus couldn't make rent. With his parents long gone, Marcus's uncle was the only close family tie remaining. The wave of guilt hit immediately between the restaurant job, the new aerospace project, and his grief for Felicia. Marcus had let months slip by without checking in as often as he should have. Torn between the pressing responsibilities of the rocket program and his emotional obligation to family, he rushed to the hospice the following day. The sterile hallways and antiseptic smell flooded him with painful memories of Felicia's final days. He found his uncle in a dimly lit room, frail and surrounded by the monotonous beeping of medical machines. Marcus forced a smile, though tears burned behind his eyes. The older man mustered a weak grin in return, beckoning Marcus closer. They spoke in hushed tones, recollecting simpler times. His uncle asked about the big, important work Marcus had undertaken. Eyes shining with pride, he told Marcus he always knew the boy who tinkered with model rockets in the backyard was destined for something extraordinary. Despite his weakened voice, his uncle insisted that life was too short for half measures and regrets. He urged Marcus to go all in on his dreams, reminding him that greatness often requires the most terrifying leap of faith. The conversation drained Marcus emotionally. Watching the man who once carried him on his shoulders as a child now struggling to hold on to each breath felt like an echo of past heartbreak. He found himself questioning his decisions again. Should he bury himself in work at a time when his family needed him most? Or would his uncle disapprove if Marcus abandoned the second chance he had found? The next few days brought relentless emotional strain. Balancing time at the hospice, finalizing the rocket's next test iteration, and trying to meet his shifting restaurant obligations stretched Marcus to his limit. He'd hurry from the lab to the hospice and occasionally pop in at the restaurant to prevent losing his job. Sleep became a luxury. In his darkest moments, he thought about quitting the engineering project to focus entirely on his uncle's final days. Yet each time he hovered on the edge of that decision, he recalled the man's voice urging him not to hold back. That Sunday morning, after a grueling overnight shift in the lab, Marcus received the call he had dreaded. His uncle had passed. Arriving at the hospice, he sat quietly by the empty bed, tears streaming down his face as he realized how small and fleeting life indeed was. Despite the heartbreak, he felt an unshakable conviction that his uncle's last words had given him a mission: to chase his ambitions entirely, no matter the risks. Marcus promised to honor that final wish by stepping out of the hospice into the cold, gray morning light. Not long after, the day came for the second large-scale engine test. The new hardware gleamed under the high-intensity lights, every surface meticulously inspected, every bolt torqued to the precise specification. A group of executives had gathered to observe, along with a few cautiously optimistic investors. This test was about more than proving the engine's viability. It was a chance for Marcus and his team to restore faith after the previous calamity. From the control room, visible through reinforced glass, Marcus could see the rocket stage perched on its test stand, hoses, and sensors connecting it to the massive fuel tanks and data collection units. At a table nearby, Dr. Roberts keyed in the final readiness checks, her jaw set with determined focus. Calvin's fingers flew over his keyboard, confirming that his revised code was loaded into the system. Sophia double-checked the external bracing and gave the all-clear for aerodynamic considerations. Elon stood quietly in the corner, a faint smile curving his lips, though tension shadowed his eyes. As the countdown began, Marcus's heartbeat thundered in his ears. He clutched a small, faded photo of Felicia in one hand, a private gesture of reassurance. A swirl of conflicting emotions roiled in his chest: hope, terror, grief, and an unyielding desire to succeed. When the voice over the loudspeaker reached 0, a brilliant flare erupted at the engine's base. The roar was deafening, the ground seeming to quake underfoot. For the first few moments, no sign of trouble appeared. Data streams glowed on the monitors, thrust levels, internal temperatures, and vibration readings, all aligning with their calculations. Then, as the engine reached a higher throttle setting, tension crackled among the team. Marcus held his breath, bracing for any sign of stress or flameout. But the rocket steadied, maintaining a stable burn. A triumphant shout erupted from Dr. Roberts as crucial temperature thresholds remained within safe margins. Calvin's code was executed smoothly, adjusting the fuel mixture in real time. For nearly 2 minutes, the engine sustained its designed output, a remarkable feat given the complexity and magnitude of the modifications. The engine shut down with a controlled flourish when the test finally ended. A hush enveloped the room as the last echoes of thrust died away. Then, the overhead monitors displayed green across the board: no structural failures, catastrophic temperature spikes, or meltdown of composite layers. A moment of collective disbelief was followed by a rising swell of exhilaration, heads turning toward one another in awe. Marcus felt a wave of relief and joy, a glimmer of tears in his eyes. They had done it. This wasn't some perfect flight to the stars, but it was the proof of concept they desperately needed. Applause broke out spontaneously. Executives scribbled notes, and investors nodded, eyes alight with the possibility of what this could mean for future developments. Elon approached Marcus, offering a firm handshake. "Congratulations," he said, voice resonating with genuine pride. "This is only the beginning." Amid the congratulations, Marcus caught Dr. Roberts' eye. She beamed, no longer clouded by the guilt of the previous failure. Calvin hooped in the background, pumping his fist into the air, and Sophia allowed herself a rare grin. At that moment, Marcus felt an almost spiritual affirmation that he was precisely where he needed to be. Though sorrow for his uncle's passing still weighed on his heart, he sensed that this victory was a testament to Felicia's and his uncle's unwavering faith in him. With the successful test under their belts, the team's work began drawing attention on a global scale. Media outlets ran glowing articles about Elon's latest engineering venture, speculating on the potential to revolutionize space travel again. Investors who had once hesitated started pouring funds into the project, eager to ride the wave of success. There was talk of scaling up production and possibly launching a full test flight within the next 2 years. The mood at the facility was electric. Late nights no longer felt grueling but exhilarating, each day closer to a dream that once seemed impossible. Yet, amid the flurry of praise, a new set of obstacles emerged. The increased visibility brought with it an onslaught of scrutiny. Environmental activists questioned the impact of high-frequency rocket launches on Earth's climate. Rival aerospace companies sniped from the sidelines, hinting that Elon's team was overpromising. Meanwhile, regulatory bodies imposed stricter compliance hurdles, demanding exhaustive documentation of every new material and process. The barrage of legal paperwork threatened to swamp the lean, fast-moving group. For Marcus, the external pressures manifested as countless interviews, technical briefings, and consultations with lawyers. Whenever regulators demanded proof of safety or viability, the onus landed heavily on him and his teammates to present robust data. Some nights, he found himself writing lengthy reports into the early morning hours, his eyes bloodshot from the computer's glare. The sense of triumph from the engine test started to fade in the face of bureaucracy and public relations fiascos waiting to erupt at the slightest misstep. Then came an unexpected media leak revealing Marcus's identity. A journalist uncovered that the quiet genius behind much of the engine's design was, until recently, a waiter at a high-end restaurant. The story blew up overnight, capturing the public's imagination with headlines like, "From serving tables to launching rockets." While some heralded it as an inspiring, Cinderella-like tale, others ridiculed the idea that someone who had stepped away from NASA could waltz back into cutting-edge aerospace. Criticism poured in from skeptical analysts who labeled the project a reckless experiment driven by inflated egos. The media attention triggered an onslaught of inquiries. The restaurant where Marcus once worked was under the spotlight, fielding calls from tabloids wanting to dig into any personal history. Embarrassed by the attention, Marcus's old manager asked him not to return to work, effectively dismissing him. At first, Marcus felt regretful, realizing that any semblance of a safety net was gone. But there was also a strange sense of freedom. No more dual life. No more feeling torn between two worlds. Elon and the rest of the team assured Marcus they had his back, but the strain on him was palpable. His phone buzzed incessantly with interview requests or curious acquaintances from his past. He found solace in the lab, where equations and physical prototypes didn't judge or pry. Between regulatory challenges, mounting public scrutiny, and the final severance from his old life, Marcus teetered on the edge of overwhelm. Yet he remembered his promise, to himself, Felicia, and his uncle, to never again let fear dictate his path. Determined not to falter, he braced himself for the next wave of developments, hoping their momentum and a dash of faith would carry them forward. After the sensational headlines and regulatory battles, the team accelerated into a new innovation stage. Elon secured additional facilities, effectively doubling their capacity for research and fabrication. What began as a modest group of a few brilliant individuals morphed into an expanding think tank populated by experts in astrophysics, AI-driven simulations, and advanced chemical engineering. Dr. Roberts took on a managerial role for the structural teams, overseeing a crew of fresh graduates and veteran engineers, forging them into a cohesive unit. Calvin was entrusted with leading a specialized software division, working on next-gen guidance systems that integrated machine learning models to predict and adapt mid-flight. Marcus found himself simultaneously exhilarated and overwhelmed by the rapid growth. He spent his days hopping from one lab to another, troubleshooting design issues or consulting on material selection. He guided novices through complex principles, drawing on his NASA background to offer historical lessons about what had and hadn't worked in previous missions. Whenever he walked the corridors, he glimpsed prototypes of propulsion systems, landing modules, and life support mechanisms. Each design sprang from a desire to push the envelope of what humanity could achieve. Despite the significant scale-up, the ghost of potential failure lingered in the background. Investors who had jumped on board wanted clear timelines for returns, pressuring the engineers to maintain a breakneck pace. The promise of launching a full-scale rocket within 2 years now felt both thrilling and terrifying. Recalling the heartbreak of previous losses, Marcus wondered whether they were pushing too hard, leaving too little margin for error. But Elon, the optimist, encouraged them to dream bigger and keep forging ahead, trusting that meticulous engineering and passion would see them through. One of the most significant innovations emerged when Calvin's team introduced an AI-based solution to analyze terabytes of flight data in seconds, offering real-time adjustments to the rocket's trajectory. This was the kind of breakthrough that could reshape the entire industry. Enthusiasm rippled through the facility as they ran simulations showing more efficient orbits, potential routes for lunar landings, and perhaps even an eventual trip to Mars. Though these achievements lay beyond the immediate horizon, Marcus marveled at how swiftly imagination and expertise could transform far-flung ideas into tangible realities. The growth brought personal changes too. Marcus moved into a modest yet more comfortable apartment closer to the lab, leaving behind the cramped space that had once symbolized his withdrawal from life. He started forging new friendships with his colleagues, and while he still missed Felicia and his uncle deeply, he felt their guiding presence in each choice he made. The restaurant chapter of his life felt distant now, a time of healing and quiet reflection that had somehow led him to this roaring crescendo of opportunity. In quieter moments, Marcus reflected on how far he had come. He no longer hid behind anonymity, nor did he shy away from the magnitude of his ambitions. There was a quiet confidence in his stance, a sense that he was exactly where he was meant to be, even if the path had been littered with heartbreak and detours. As more engineers and dreamers joined their ranks, the facility hummed with a vibrant energy, each new voice adding texture to the collective vision. Though the journey ahead loomed with uncertain challenges, the seeds of greatness were firmly planted. Marcus grew convinced that they were on the cusp of achieving something monumental. As the final countdown to a public demonstration drew near, the demands on everyone's time escalated to an all-consuming level. Sleep became a rare commodity, replaced by midnight brainstorming sessions and the frantic clang of metal on metal as technicians hammered out last-minute modifications. Marcus often spent entire days at the facility, catnapping in a spare office when exhaustion overtook him. Each time he closed his eyes, he wondered if it was worth the personal cost. Yet the memory of his uncle's parting words and Felicia's unwavering faith burned like a beacon in his heart. The public demonstration was set to be a grand spectacle, a live-streamed event where the newly developed rocket, powered by the team's next-generation engine, would undergo a high-altitude test flight. If successful, it would prove that reusable rockets could be optimized even further, cutting costs and ushering in a new era of accessible space travel. Countless design, coding, welding, and testing hours had led them here, and the stakes were enormous. In the final days, the pressure mounted. Investors flew in globally, expecting polished presentations and a flawless performance. Government officials arrived for inspections, pointing out potential compliance issues that threatened to delay the launch. Some team members bickered over last-minute design tweaks, uncertain whether an improved solution might compromise safety. Dr. Roberts, once so stoic, showed signs of strain, her eyes ringed with fatigue. Calvin spent nights debugging flight software, convinced a hidden glitch might surface at the worst possible moment. Sophia tirelessly rehearsed emergency protocols with test pilots, ensuring every scenario was accounted for. Marcus felt the weight of it all most intensely. His presence had become symbolic, a testament to second chances and hidden genius. Media outlets clamored for interviews, eager to spin the waiter-turned-engineer narrative. Privately, Marcus battled waves of doubt. He struggled with the guilt of not having enough time for personal reflection, let alone forging deeper connections beyond work. Romantic interests were relegated to fleeting texts. Even his friendships within the lab felt overshadowed by relentless deadlines. He often stared at the stars late at night, alone in the courtyard behind the facility, reminding himself that this punishing schedule was part of the price for progress. On the evening before the demonstration, Elon gathered the core team for a brief pep talk. He acknowledged the sacrifices everyone had made, time with families, mental health, even financial risks. He urged them to see beyond the immediate scramble and remember why they were doing this in the first place: to inspire humanity, push the boundaries of technology, and pave the way for future generations who might one day set foot on distant planets. The speech struck a chord in Marcus, who felt pride and responsibility. If they succeeded, it would be a triumph not just of their collective engineering prowess but also of faith, resilience, and the innate human drive to explore. The day of the demonstration arrived beneath a brilliant sky. Spectators gathered at a safe distance, rows of temporary bleachers lined up like sentinels, while cameras broadcast the event to audiences worldwide. The rocket, sleek, imposing, and emblazoned with the logos of Elon's company, stood tall on the launch pad, a testament to years of labor, sleepless nights, and unwavering determination. It was a moment of electric anticipation, an entire generation of dreamers waiting to see if a group of engineers, including one who had once hidden behind a restaurant apron, could spark a new era in space exploration. Marcus and his teammates clustered inside the control center, finalizing checks. Dr. Roberts carefully monitored structural integrity data. Calvin monitored software readouts that tracked everything from engine temperature to flight path projections, and Sophia relayed information to the launch coordinators. When the countdown began, every second felt like a pulse of adrenaline. The rocket's engines roared to life, flames licking the launch pad as the vehicle lifted away, inch by inch at first, then gathering speed. Cheers erupted from the crowd as the rocket climbed skyward, contrails of smoke and fire trailing behind. Inside the control center, the tension was palpable, but the data streaming in looked good, guidance systems were stable, thrust levels were on target, and temperatures were within expected ranges. Marcus felt a lump in his throat as he watched the numbers climb. This was a vindication of all the sacrifices and heartbreak that had led him here. He remembered Felicia's soft laughter, his uncle's wise words, and the flicker of hope that had once kept him going when the future looked so bleak. Moments later, the rocket hit its intended altitude. The team tested stage separation flawlessly, and the engine modulations that had once failed in a catastrophic blaze now performed like clockwork. Applause thundered through the control room, tears staining more than one face. Even as the rocket reoriented for a controlled descent, the sense of triumph was overwhelming. When the booster gently touched down on the designated platform, the crowd burst into a euphoric roar, broadcast worldwide for millions to witness. In the weeks that followed, accolades poured in. Headlines declared the mission a stunning success, cementing the team's reputation as pioneers of next-generation rocketry. Marcus found himself inundated with interview requests. Despite the spotlight, he never forgot the personal journey that had brought him here. He made a point to share credit with Dr. Roberts, Calvin, Sophia, and the countless others who had poured their hearts into the program. During a particularly moving press conference, he dedicated the success to Felicia and his uncle, speaking candidly about the heartbreak that had once driven him into obscurity and the renewed purpose that had lifted him back out. Rather than bask in fame, the team planned the next phase, perhaps a lunar landing test or a mission to place advanced orbital stations. Marcus, who had once merely hoped to find closure for his painful chapters, now saw a broader legacy forming around him. Young people across the globe wrote letters, emails, and social media posts expressing how his story inspired them to pursue their buried passions. For some, it was a push to enroll in engineering programs. For others, a catalyst to resume long-neglected dreams in art, medicine, or community service. The idea that personal tragedy did not have to be a full stop resonated deeply. In a quiet moment, Marcus stood before a newly completed prototype of a next-gen rocket. He ran his fingers across the smooth alloy, marveling at what a handful of determined minds could accomplish together. He felt neither regret for the years he spent in hidden sorrow nor any fear that he might fail again. Instead, he felt a sense of profound gratitude, a gratitude that encompassed everyone who had nurtured his spirit and challenged him to reach for the stars, literally and figuratively. And in that tranquility, Marcus understood that the legacy they were building went far beyond rocket launches. It was about hope, resilience, and the boundless capacity of the human heart to transform darkness into light. Thank you for joining us on this incredible journey of rediscovery, determination, and unyielding dreams. We hope you've been inspired by Marcus's leap from quiet waiter to visionary aerospace engineer. Stay tuned for our next story, where we explore a gifted coder who cracks a centuries-old code, revealing a mystery that could alter history. Until then, keep chasing your own stars.